Well, the notorious Boulders Mall incident has reignited the conversation of the cost of preserving and celebrating African culture and history. People from all walks of life weighed in on the incident, mostly chastising the now suspended Boulders Mall manager. The manager of the mall in Midrand Gauteng was captured in a video refusing entry to a man who was wearing Ndebele attire. Amongst the many questions here is what role should African literature play in preserving our rich African history and culture? To discuss this, we are joined by Abdul Mogale, who is the president of the National Writers Association of South Africa, or NWASA. Also joining us for this conversation is Suzan Skhosana, who is a poet and a member of NWASA. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's start off here. What role do you think the literature can play, Abdul, when it comes to the preservation, number one, of our culture, but also number two, making sure that it's part of the conversations that we ordinarily would have about African culture, so it doesn't come across as something that is exotic?
Good morning, Azrael, and the viewers. I think the question that of Boulders is not an isolated incident. It is broader than that. We have in the same week saw a teacher combing a hair of an African learner because the hair looks inappropriate. It has to do with how people dress, how people speak. It's not uncommon to hear somebody saying in the workplace that if two people speak in a language they don't understand, that say you can't speak that language because I cannot understand it. And I think the role of literature and literary activists in general is to further deepen the awareness about African values, African culture, what we eat, and all that. It is not something that it is by the way. I mean, if I come dressed in a particular way, should I be told that I should wear in the Western sense? And let me ask you another question, which would be a flip side of it. If an Africana woman walks into a village, dressed in slacks, and they are told you can't come here because here women wear dresses, that is something that we need to have a common understanding of, appreciate and respect each other's cultures, values, how they dress, what they eat, and how they speak.
How they dress, how they eat, and how they speak. But there's also another part of that conversation in that the two incidents that you referred to, the one where the teacher is combing the pupil's hair and this particular one with Boulders, is that in both these cases, if there's a victim, the perpetrators are both black.
Of course, that's why it's not a racial issue. It's not a black or white issue. It is a matter of how do we understand each other. I mean, I'm a Mulubedu, and here is Suzan. She's a Botswana. I need to respect Suzan's cultures. I need to respect how they speak, what they do, and I think that's we've allowed our cultures and values as Africans to be denigrated to a level that we're playing in that space, which we shouldn't play in that. And I think the role of the writers and generally the creatives is to bring that awareness, is to promote that awareness. I mean, we saw the late King Zwelithini, being planted over the past week, and people were dressed in the Zulu regalia, in the Zulu culture. You could see the blend from people who came from there and people who come from outside. There was a beautiful blending of the values of society here and across. So it's not about whether you're black or you're white. It's about how do you understand the cultures and how do you respect them.
Okay. And Suzan, for you, how do you understand the role that literature can play to help foster that discourse?
Hello, and my name is Suzan from Kabalatsani village. It's based in northwestern side of RSA. I am highly impressed with the number of people, like the maximum majority of people participating currently in cultural and literature sector. Taking example with the Abantu at Soweto, look at that yearly festivals taking place. Pity here in Northwest province, you find that we only have few that continues where the old ancestors who were participating in the literature field have started in the past. Giving an example with the Mihakasi, the first writer of a book that was prescribed in schools right here in Kabalatsani village, titled the Tutoking. I mean, after him, there haven't been other writers following him. It seems like there's no activities coming to literature taking place here in Northwest, more specifically in the village Kabalatsani. I'm here to bring a change to that. That's the reason why I have started a writers club to carry on expanding the literature sector in our country. And regarding what took place in Midrand, we are like, we seem to be a laughing stock of our own self. We are so Europeanized to an extent that we are being told to hate our own self. We are told to hate our own culture by our own people. We have gone through a lot in the past. Right now, we just here to say through NWASA, Marumo Fast, as you can see, the logo of NWASA itself, it's reflecting some South African colors on it. So with a right that is facing down. So that red right is like trying to correct the situations that they have taken place in the past. We are not expecting to be facing almost the similar situations among ourselves as black people. I remember Professor Vilakazi from UNISA, the late Professor Vilakazi, once said to me, the African people, they will visit Europe and they tend to get easily Europeanized. Hence, the Europeans that visit Africa, they remain European still. So what does it tell? I'm against this thing of people laughing at the people of their own culture. Like even now on social media, it has turned out to be something like a joke. You would even hear a black person saying, no, it's an inappropriate dress for a mall. I mean,
what do you think? What do you think informs that, Susan? What do you think makes an African who is in Africa laugh at another African who is wearing that regalia? Where that person feels that there's a sense of pride in wearing their traditional clothing, but yet in the eyes of another African, it's seen as a joke.
Hence, I said, Professor Vilakazi said, Africans get easily Europeanized. So an African person will say the African person wasn't supposed to be wearing that regalia at the mall. But between the mall and the African culture and tradition, which came first between the two? That's the question I would be asking to those Africans who are saying it wasn't appropriate to be worn at the mall. Thank you.
And then to that particular point, then, Abdul, do you think that we should also be having a conversation about how modernization also poses a threat to the preservation of those cultures and that pride?
Of course, that's a discussion that we should have. I mean, we come from the apartheid era, for instance, where it was not appropriate for an African to behave in a particular way. I mean, I've just seen what you had on the screen. And somebody may come and say, those people are dancing naked. But this is us. This is who we are. This is what we need to be. And this is what we need to inculcate on our children, encourage societies across to do that. But let me bring something that I remember happened in the late 80s when Pope John Paul visited Lesotho. He was appreciative of how the church operates there. And he went on to say that we need to indigenize the church wherever it exists. To a point that if you go to a Roman Catholic church today, it's you'll find that there is a blend of African values with the tradition that the church carries. And I think that's what we need to amplify as a society, not only South Africa, but across the world.
Let's then quickly touch on the government itself and the role that the state should be playing in making sure that we preserve, but we also promote these cultural practices, and also a practice of saying that, listen, I'd love to wear my traditional regalia. Abdul, what do you think the role of the state should be in that regard? And the argument that was made in that clip by the manager of the mall was that right of admission is reserved.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, because you see, although the mall is a private space, is a privately owned entity, it has become a public space in that the public goes there freely to do whatever, whether they are going to the gym, whether they are going to buy grocery, or just to appreciate the mall is a public space. But the point that you are raising about government, when I had an opportunity of sitting at the Culture and Development Conference in 1993, in the midst of the discussion around the Constitution of the Republic, one of the striking things that was discussed at that point was the issue of languages, where there was an argument that we must have two official languages in South Africa, and the other languages become languages of communication. And if we had allowed that to happen, it would have meant that the other 9 official languages, including the Khoi, the San, and the San languages, would just be languages of communication, and they would just be relegated. So the question then carried that to include all cultures, religions, and creed, and to respect that. And I think that the government, not only the government, but the media institutions of education, both high and basic, should make being African the in thing, the only thing that we have.
Abdul, just quickly then, do you think that some languages are being elevated at the expense of other languages, and the conversation also being around Afrikaans, for instance, and we've seen what's happening in Stellenbosch, where some of the students there are saying that Afrikaans is being banned on the university?
I think that the challenge that we have is to elevate all languages to the same status, and be able to promote them in that sense. But if you go to schools, there's still a debate whether African languages should be taught or not. And I think that's a discussion that we need to push through, and we need to appreciate that all languages and cultures must enjoy equal status and value.
Okay. Suzan, let's get your opinion on that, on the use of language in the country. And also, when you're done giving us that answer, please give us a rendition of one of the poems that you wanted to give.
All right, thank you. I'm supporting the statement of the president of NWASA, Abdul Mogale, in terms of having all the languages back. If you can check in the past, you'd find the books prescribed in high school, like tutoking, I've mentioned previously. You understand, if we had the continuation of these old books that were published previously, I don't think there would have been the historical record imbalances in the country. The learners would be privileged enough to know the histories of their own, schools. Like right now, you'll realize that the village scholars from where I'm staying right here in Khabalazane village. They travel to Johannesburg just to learn a glimpse of from 2 pages of information that was written on the legendary Mehakasi, which is forming part of their own school history. It was written in passing where that kind of information could have been brought right here home. That's the reason I'm existing here through the history art gallery that I'm owning at Khabalazane village, to bring back this information home. At the very same time, we need the government support to be helping out with this repatriation and preservations of these African languages. So I'm keen to render you this item. It's a poem, like I've said previously, I'm a writer and a poet. I'm emulating my great-grandfather, Mihakasi, the first founder of the school right here in Khabalazane, who was an alias poet laureate. It's a special poem for the village, Khabalazane, where I'm currently operating a Bokwaskwena History Art Gallery. It goes as follows. Introducing myself, ke lefatla lwa bo mantegi, ke le tsubutsubu lwa lefatla, ke lefatla lwa mafatla, ka re phefo e fatle di tlo selemo ke ra ka kgwedi ya matlhabanaga, nna mme ga nkiletse ke boka lwa mpona. Ka re ke kgapatsunyana ke kgwamaje ke re dumelang bagaetso ke nna Mantela Mekonanyana mo gobe ngwanyena morolong o moseso mo tlokolo o mo jolo khantang bo bokwena ke moruku o kubela go tsene matsepe tlogolo sa khasia makgwalepe tlogolo sa go mmalampiti ka re mokekola sutlileng sefatlhego ke tseo dikakana ka re ke motswa gole khole ke ra khole kgwensa Khabalatsana moriti ere ke ena ke reta ke ena khla ke Khabalatsana moriti na ga di khomo le batho na ga ke lela lenato ke letse Khabalatsana moriti na ga e senang sekhupi sa yona se sengwe sekhupi sa yona lenyora le bona ga etsatsi le yeni au mojuana bolekgele ho la ra kwa rapopele ka re dipetlwane di sala kwa mapenane bana ba gao kwa gae balla ba pelwe botlhoko ba re au diwane maitso re amuse a fara la le lenyoro le teng re reng Khabalatsana moriti gomola ka re mosabetsana gomola ke go belege ka re ke go belege ka thariana mane. Thank you.
Well done. I'm told that the crew in the background is ululating. Unfortunately, I can't do it. But
I'm also wearing the Setswana blanket. I'm here to say the culture is here to stay. There's no one who's going to be against our cultural practices and our presentation of our own ancestral clothes.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Suzan, just quickly, just in a nutshell, what is that poem about?
Okay. The poem, I've decided to add some modifications in it. It's originally written over 100 years back by the legend, the previously mentioned legend, Mfokeng. Like I've said, he was my great-grandfather, born in 1864 to 1956. It was a special poem for the village Khabalazane because there's so much history based on that historical background of the village, where he had to come from Rustenburg, born and raised at Matlare, and then had to move with the German missionaries to Hebron. Started Hebron Sunday schools at the Lutheran Church Missionary of Mujuani. It was the land was still Mujuani, though it was changed into an Afrikaans name because it was taken by some Boers. So they had to fight to buy back that land from Mr. Engelbrecht to repatriate back the lands, including Khabalazane. So on his arrival here from Hebron, he had to find a way of, because he was elected by the chief of Bakwena, Chief J.M. Mamkhale, to come here and Christianize the community, since he was a commissioner to the German missioners. But he had to be against that kind of education that was given to the black people, particularly Bakwena. He said the old government didn't care about educating a black child. If you say you have your PhD, that was by only knowing how to, from missionary schools, knowing how to read Hari, Baya, Swana, or Bible, even Kathasima in your own mother language.
Yeah.
So he had to fight against it. To him, it was an old government traditional informal education. He had to cut the trunk of the marula tree and ask the first community of Kabbalah, since I have said previously that he had to be elected to come and relocate to stay here to teach the people. Though he was against that kind of a missionary education. He had to make sure that the black children are equally educated, similar to the whites of that era.
Okay,
that's why he had to cut the trunk of marula tree here at Kabalatzani and call the first village learners, them sitting on some rocks. He had to use it as the blackboard, as he was a self-taught sculptor. And then that's where majority of people learned a basic education. And then in the afternoons, the parents
very passionate
were coming under the same
about this. But thank you so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. And I have to say that I really do appreciate the passion as well as the historical significance of the poem that you just delivered as well. Abdul, thank you so much for your time as well. I was hoping that we could have a conversation also about the decolonization of education in the country. But thank you so much for your time. Abdul Mogale there, who's the president of the National Writers Association of South Africa, as well as Suzan Skhosana, who is a poet as well as a member of NWASA. Thank you so much for your time. We go to a quick ad break. When we come back, the agenda continues.